Hello, dear learners. I, Dr. Priti Khalila Raskwa, course coordinator of this MOOC on heritage tourism, wish to congratulate you all on successfully completing this MOOC. Throughout this course, we have explored the rich and multidimensional world of heritage and tourism, examining how culture, history, memory, identity, and travel interest to shape human experiences across time and space. This course began by introducing learners to the fundamental concepts of heritage and tourism, establishing a strong theoretical base for understanding the scope and significance of heritage tourism in the contemporary world. Learners were first familiarized with the meaning and nature of heritage, which includes both tangible and intangible elements inherited from the past. Tangible heritage refers to the physical resources such as monuments, archaeological sites, forts, museums, temples, churches, palaces, historic cities, and cultural landscapes, while intangible heritage includes traditions, languages, rituals, folklore, festivals, performing arts, crafts, and local knowledge systems. Heritage was discussed not merely as a collection of historical remains, but as a living representation of cultural identity, memory, and social continuity. Alongside heritage, the concepts of tourism was explored as a social, cultural, and economic activity involving the movement of people for leisure, pilgrimage, education, business, or other purposes. Learners understood tourism as a dynamic global phenomenon that contributes to economic development, cultural exchange, employment generations, and destinations promotion. The course highlighted how tourism and heritage are closely interconnected, as heritage resources often serve as major attractions that motivate travel and shape visitor experiences. The relationship between heritage and tourism was examined in depth to help learners appreciate both its opportunities and challenges. Heritage tourism plays an important role in preserving cultural resources, generating revenue, creating awareness, and strengthening local identities. At the same time, excessive tourism can lead to commercializations, overcrowding, environmental degradations, and loss of authenticity. Through these discussions, learners gained an understanding of the need to balance tourism development with heritage conservation and community welfare. This course then traced the historical evolution of travel and tourism across different civilizations and periods. Learners explored how travel has existed since ancient times for various purposes such as trade, religion, exploration, education, diplomacy, and migrations. Early religious pilgrimage to sacred places such as temples, monasteries, shrines, mosques, and churches were among the earliest organized forms of travel. Pilgrimage travel long distances in search of spiritual fulfillment, religious merit, healing, and cultural exchange, contributing significantly to the development of routes, inns, marketplaces, and cultural interactions. Trade and commercial expeditions also played a major role in shaping early travel networks. Merchants travel across regions and continents through famous trade routes such as the Silk Road and Spice Route, facilitating not only the exchange of goods but also ideas, technologies, religions, languages, and cultural practices. These interactions laid the foundation for intellectuals, communication, and early forms of tourism related nobility. Educational and exploratory journeys were another important aspects of early travel history. Scholars, philosophers, monks, and explorers traveled to centers of learning, royal courts, libraries, and distant lands to acquire knowledge, conduct research, and document cultures. Such journeys contributed to geographical discoveries, cultural understanding, and the spread of intellectual traditions across societies. The course further examined the transformations of travel during the industrial and post-industrial periods. The industrial revolutions brought major technological advancements such as railways, steamships, improved roads, and later air transport, making travel faster, safer, and more affordable. Mass tourism gradually emerged as leisure travel became accessible to broader sections of society. In post-industrial societies, tourism evolved into a major global industry characterized by organizing tours, heritage destinations, cultural festivals, museums, and international travel networks. Modern heritage tourism was discussed as a result of changing lifestyles, rising disposable incomes, globalizations, urbanization, and increasing interest in culture, history, and identity. Learners also explored how contemporary tourists seek meaningful, authentic, and experimental travel experiences that connect them with local cultures and historical narratives. As the course proceeds, learners were introduced to several important theoretical concepts that form the intellectual foundation of heritage tourism studies. These concepts helped learners move beyond a basic understanding of tourism and develop a deeper aspirations of how heritage is created, interpreted, represented, and experienced in different social and cultural contexts. One of the central ideas discussed in the course was the concept of authenticity. Learners explored how tourists often seek authentic experiences that provide a genuine connections with the history, culture, tradition, and lifestyles of a destination. The course examined different dimensions of authenticity, including original heritage structures, traditional practices, local customs, indigenous knowledge, and cultural performances. At the same time, learners critically reflected on the challenges of maintaining authenticity in an era of commercializations and mass tourism where heritage may sometimes be modified, reconstructed, or packaged primarily for tourist consumption. This encourages learners to understand that authenticity is not always fixed or objective, that can also be socially constructed and interpreted differently by communities, tourists, and heritage managers. Another key concept explored was interpretation, which refers to the ways in which heritage is communicated and explained to visitors. Learners understand that heritage sites are not self explanatory. Rather, meanings are created through guides, exhibitions, signboards, museums, storytelling, digital media, performances, and educational activities. Effective interpretations help visitors connect emotionally and intellectually with heritage resources, making their experiences more meaningful and memorable. This course further explored the concept of cultural and heritage tourism as a specialized form of tourism motivated by interest in history, culture, tradition, art, architecture, and local ways of life. Learners understood how heritage tourism contributes to cultural preservation, intercultural understanding, economic development, and identity formation. Simultaneously, the course encourages critical reflection on issues such as cultural commodifications, over-tourism, and unequal representation within tourism practices. The course also examined monuments, memorials, and fortifications as important heritage resources that preserve political, military, architectural, and commemorative histories. Monuments and memorials often symbolize national identity, collective pride, sacrifice, and remembrance, while forts and defensive structures reflected historical conflicts, governance systems, and strategic planning. Museums and exhibitions were discussed as significant institutions of heritage preservation, education, and tourism. Learners explored how museums collect, conserve, and display objects of historical and cultural significance while also functioning as spaces for interpretations, learning, and public engagement. The concept of living history and experimental learning demonstrated how interactive museum practices can create immersive visitor experiences. The course further examined heritage cities and cultural landscapes, where the relationship between people, architecture, environment, and historical community becomes visible. Learners explored how urban heritage reflects layers of historical development, cultural diversity, and traditional lifestyles. Cultural landscapes such as agricultural terraces, sacred groves, river fronts, and rural settlements were discussed as examples of the interactions between human and nature over time. Special emphasis throughout the course was placed on storytelling, collective memory, and heritage narratives. Learners understood that heritage tourism is not only about physical sites but also about the stories attached to them. Narrative plays a crucial role in shaping how tourists perceive places, communities, and histories. Stories of kings, freedom fighters, indigenous communities, migrations, conflicts, spirituality, and everyday life help transform heritage sites into meaningful cultural experiences. The course also highlighted the concept of collective memory, which refers to the shared understanding and remembrance of the past within communities and societies. Heritage sites often became spaces where memories of glory, suffering, resistance, identity, and belonging are preserved and communicated across generations. Learners critically examined how some narratives are promoted prominently in tourism while others may be marginalized or excluded, raising important questioning about representations, power, and historical interpretations. One of the important areas explored in this course was dark tourism, which refers to travel associated with places connected to death, tragedy, suffering, conflict, disaster, or human atrocities. Learners examined sites such as war memorials, battlefields, prisons, genocide memorials, disaster zones, and locations associated with political violence and collective trauma. The course discussed why tourists are drawn to such places and how these sites function as spaces of remembrance, reflection, education, and historical awareness. Special attention was given to the ethical dimension of dark tourism also. Learners critically reflected on important questions such as how suffering should be represented, whether tragedy can become commercialized for tourism purposes, and how site managers can balance education with visitor sensitivity and respect for victims and local communities. Through these discussions, learners understood that dark tourism is not merely about curiosity or entertainment, but also about confronting difficult histories, promoting peace, and preserving collective memory. Another major theme of the course was religious and pilgrimage tourism, one of the oldest and most significant forms of travel in human civilizations. Learners explored how sacred places such as temples, monasteries, mosques, churches, shrines, and pilgrimage routes attract millions of visitors seeking spiritual fulfillment, religious merit, healing, cultural understanding, and personal transformations. The course examined how pilgrimage tourism shapes social interactions, local economies, cultural continuity, and regional identities. The course further introduced maritime heritage tourism, focusing on the historical importance of oceans, rivers, ports, and trade routes in shaping civilizations and cultural interactions. Learners studied maritime cities, forts, harbors, seaports, and coastal settlements that preserve evidence of trade, exploring migration, warfare, and cultural exchange. Historic trade routes such as the Silk Road and Spice Route were examined as networks that connected distant regions through commerce, religion, art, technology, and ideas. A significant section of the course was developed to colonial and post-colonial heritage, which encourage learners to critically examine how heritage tourism is shaped by historical power relations and political histories. And urban centers were studied as reminders of imperial rule and cultural influence. Learners explored how colonial powers used architecture, planning, and cultural representation to establish authority and reshape local societies. At the same time, the course examined post-colonial perspectives that question dominant historical narratives and seek to reinterpret heritage from the viewpoint of formerly colonized communities. Learners critically analyzed how colonial heritage can be both a source of historical understanding and a reminder of exploitation, inequality, and cultural domination. Discussions emphasize the need for inclusive interpretations that recognizes multiple voices, experiences, and memories associated with colonial histories. The course also focused on indigenous and local histories, highlighting the importance of representing marginalized communities and preserving their cultural traditions, oral histories, knowledge systems, and identities. Learners explored how indigenous communities often possess unique relationship with land, nature, spirituality, and cultural practices that form an important part of heritage tourism. However, the course also addressed the challenges faced by indigenous communities within tourism development, including misrepresentations, cultural commodifications, exclusion from decision making, and unequal distribution of tourism benefits. Learners were encouraged to understand the importance of community participation, ethical representation, and respectful engagement in heritage tourism planning and interpretations. A significant part of the course was devoted to understanding the principles and practices of heritage management and sustainability, which are essential for ensuring the long-term preservation and responsible use of cultural and historical resources. As heritage tourism continues to grow globally, heritage sites increasingly faces pressure from mass tourism, urbanization, and environmental degradations, commercializations, and changing social conditions. In this context, the course emphasizes the importance of adopting sustainable approaches that balance tourism development with conservation, community welfare, and cultural integrity. One of the major areas discussed was visitor management, which refers to the planning and regulation of tourist activities at heritage destinations in order to protect the site while ensuring meaningful visitor experiences. Learners examined how uncontrolled tourism can result in overcrowding, physical damage to monuments, pollution, traffic congestions, and disruption of local communities. Through various examples and case studies, the course highlighted strategies such as visitor flow regulations, guided tours, zoning, trained anti-system, interpretation, planning, and behavioral guidelines that help minimize negative aspects on heritage sites. Closely connected to visitor management was the concept of carrying capacity, which refers to the maximum number of visitors a heritage site can accommodate without causing physical deteriorations, environmental damage, or decline in visitor satisfaction. Learners understood that carrying capacity is not only physical but also social, cultural, and ecological in nature. Excessive tourism can reduce the quality of visitor experiences, strain local infrastructure, and disturb the cultural and social life of communities living around heritage destinations. Therefore, sustainable tourism planning requires careful monitoring and management of tourism growth. Another important component of the course focused on conservation policies and legal frameworks related to heritage protections. Learners studied the role of national and international regulations in safeguarding monuments, archaeological sites, cultural landscapes, and intangible heritage. Discussions covered heritage conservation principles, restoration ethics, documentation practices, and the challenges involved in preserving historical authenticity while adapting sites for tourism use. Special attention was given to the institutional roles of organizations such as UNESCO and the Archaeological Survey of India, that is ASI. Learners explored how UNESCO promotes global heritage conservation through initiatives such as the World Heritage Conservation and the designation of World Heritage Site. The course also examined the role of ASI in protecting, conserving, and managing India's archaeological and historical heritage through legal measures, excavations, restoration, and heritage site administration. In the contemporary context, the course further explored the growing influence of technology in heritage tourism. Technological advancement have transformed the ways heritage is preserved, interpreted, promoted, and experienced by tourists. Learners were introduced to the use of augmented reality, that is AR, and visual reality, that is VR, technologies in museums, archaeological sites, and heritage attractions. These technologies enable visitors to experience reconstructed historical environments, interactive exhibitions, virtual tours, and immersive storytelling, thereby enhancing educational and emotional engagement. The course additionally focused on destination branding and the role of media in shaping heritage tourism. Learners understood how heritage destinations are marketed and promoted through branding strategies that emphasize cultural uniqueness, historical significance, architecture, festivals, traditions, and local identity. Effective destination branding helps create a distinctive image that attracts tourists investors, and global recognitions. The influence of media representation and film tourism was also explored in detail. Films, documentaries, television series, social media, and digital content often shape public perceptions on heritage, destinations, and influence travel decisions. Learners examine how cinematic representation can increase tourist interest in a particular location, transform places into a tourism attractions, and contribute to local economies. At the same time, the course encourages cultural reflections on issues such as stereotype, commercializations, and overexposure of heritage sites through media promotions. Finally, the course examined the economic impact of heritage tourism on local communities and regional development. Learners explored how heritage tourism generates employment opportunities, supports local businesses, encourages handcrafts and cultural industries, and contributes to infrastructure development. Heritage tourism can enhance livelihoods and create economic benefits for communities when managed responsibly and inclusively. However, the course also highlighted challenges such as economic leakage, unequal distribution of benefits, raising living costs, and displacement of local population and over-dependence on tourism economies. Therefore, learners were encouraged to recognize the importance of community participations, equitable development, and sustainable tourism models that empower local people while preserving cultural and environmental resources. Special attention was given to the role of local communities in sustainable tourism development. Learners explored the importance of involving local residents in tourism planning, decision making, and benefit sharing processes. Community participations helped preserve traditional knowledge, strengthen cultural identity, and ensure that tourism contributes to the local development rather than external exploitation. The course highlighted community-based tourism model where local people activity manage tourism activities, provide cultural experiences, and benefit economically from tourism initiative. Another important focus of the final modules was the examining of emerging trends in heritage tourism, data reshaping travel behavior and destination management across the world. One of the most significant developments discussed was the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on tourism. Learners explored how the pandemic transformed global travel patterns by increasing awareness of health, safety, hygiene, and sustainability concerns. Restrictions on international travel led to the rise of domestic tourism, rural tourism, nature-based travel, and smaller-scale personalized experiences. Post-COVID travel behavior also demonstrated a growing preference for less crowded destinations, open spaces, wellness tourism, and meaningful travel experiences. Heritage tourism destinations had to adapt by introducing digital technologies, contactless services, virtual tour, online booking system, and improved visitor management strategies. Learners understood how the pandemic highlighted the vulnerability of tourism-dependent economies while also creating opportunities for more resilient and sustainable tourism practices. The course further explored the growing importance of youth tourism in the contemporary tourism industry. Young travelers today are highly mobile, digitally connected, and culturally curious. They often seek affordable, authentic, educational, and socially engaging experiences rather than conventional sightseeing alone. Learners examined how youth tourism promotes cultural exchange, volunteer tourism, backpacking, educational travel, creative tourism, and experimental learning opportunity. By the end of this course, learners are expected to understand the concepts, evolution, and significance of heritage tourism, identity and interpreting various forms of heritage resources and tourism practices, analyze the relationship between tourism, culture, identity, and memory, then evaluate the social, economic, environmental, and ethical dimension of heritage tourism, apply principles of sustainability, conservation, and responsible tourism management. Heritage tourism is not merely about visiting places of the past, it is about understanding human civilization, preserving collective memory, promoting intellectual dialogue, and ensuring sustainable futures. As future tourism professionals, researchers, educators, policymakers, or responsible travelers, learners carry an important responsibility in safeguarding heritage while making it meaningful and accessible to society. We hope this course has enriched your understanding of heritage tourism and inspired you to further explore, research, and contribute to the field. Thank you. Thank you very much.